right. Welcome, everyone. Today we have Erin Sweeney from KIND, Kids in Need of Defense, which is an organization that supports immigrant children who are here alone in the United States in case of or for their immigration issues, and I'm guessing any other issues that they may have. Erin is an attorney with them, and she's going to speak to us today on information that's important for families and students who are immigrants in New Jersey. So welcome, Erin. And if you have any questions for Erin, please put them in the chat. And at the end, I will read them to her so she can answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for having me. As Kathy mentioned, my name is Erin Sweeney. I'm a lawyer with KIND, Kids in Need of Defense. We're a nonprofit organization that represents unaccompanied children through their immigration proceedings. So I will explain what that means in a moment. Since I'm presenting this in both English and Spanish, I have the Spanish version of the presentation on the screen, but there is an English version as well, and I believe that will be sent to you, so you will receive that later for those that don't speak Spanish. So, buenos días, mi nombre es Erin Sweeney, soy una abogada de inmigración con KIND. Somos una organización de servicios legales sin fines de lucro. Representamos a niños no acompañados en procedimientos de inmigración y voy a explicar lo que eso significa en un minuto. Okay. Today, we're not going to make it through the entire presentation. It's a very long presentation by design so that you get a lot of resources that you could use. But I am going to try to get through a few sections. So hopefully we'll be able to have time for questions as well. So hoy día vamos a revisar un poquito de esta presentación porque está muy largo y ustedes pueden revisar más después y espero que todo sea útil para ustedes. I'm going to try to present in both languages. My Spanish is not perfect, so I do ask for patience when I speak Spanish. And hopefully everyone who speaks Spanish can understand me. So, además, los pido a todos que tengan paciencia con mi español porque no hablo español con fluidez, pero espero que puedan entenderme. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to let you know is that this presentation is for educational purposes only. The intended use is only to inform participants about current policies. It's not meant to substitute for legal advice. So for any legal questions, we advise you to consult an attorney. Okay, so primero quiero que todos sepan que esta presentación es solo para fines educativos. El uso previsto es solo informar a los participantes sobre las políticas actuales. No pretende sustituir el asesoramiento legal. Para cualquier pregunta legal, consulte a un abogado. All right, this is our agenda. Excuse me, sorry. And as I said, it's very long. My goal today is to go through numbers 1, 2, and 3, and then maybe have time for questions. And then the rest you can review on your own. But for those that don't speak Spanish, I'm gonna introduce KIND and who we serve, talk about the different types of immigration relief that we see most often, and mostly that apply to unaccompanied children, but some of them could apply to anyone. And then talk a little bit about the best practices or ways to find quality legal representation so you don't get stuck in a scam or taken advantage of. The parts we won't probably get to is how to prepare your family for an emergency. So if you're facing a parent who may get deported, how do you make sure your kids will be taken care of if that happens? And also, there's a little error on the slide, sorry, but knowing your rights when you interact with ICE or the local or state police. So aquí está nuestra agenda. Durante la presentación en vivo, espero pasar por el números 1, 2 y 3 y dejar tiempo para preguntas. El resto espero que lo revises por tu cuenta y que te sea de ayuda. Okay. So first, who is KIND? Like I said before, we're a nonprofit. We provide legal services, and this is our vision. that we imagine a world in which children's rights and well-being are protected as they migrate alone in search of safety. So aquí en Kind, nuestra organización, tenemos esta visión, que imaginamos un mundo en el que los derechos y el bienestar de los niños, niñas y adolescentes estén protegidos cuando migran por su cuenta en búsqueda de seguridad. There's 3 parts to our mission. The first is we aim to provide high quality legal representation to children in immigration. Second, we advocate for laws and policies that assure the protection of children and their rights. And lastly, we actually have offices in Central in America and Mexico, and also in Europe, because we're working with countries of origin to help find long-term solutions to prevent children from having to migrate only to survive in their lives. So aquí está nuestra misión. Hay 3 partes de esa misión y puedes leer aquí que esas son las 3 partes. Okay. So this slide is, I think, just useful to understand the different types of legal statuses that somebody could have in the United States. So if you look at it from top to bottom, the top is kind of the most permanent status, which is US citizen. If you're a US citizen, this is something that you basically can't lose. I mean, you can, but it's extremely, extremely rare. And it's usually when somebody gives it up, their citizenship, but it doesn't expire. It doesn't matter if you commit a crime, they can't take it away from you. You know, this is a permanent status. The next section, you have lawful permanent resident. So this is green card holders. These are individuals who have a right to live here forever, as long as they don't commit certain crimes that could cause them to be deported, or certain types of travel. So if they leave the country for too long, a green card is designed for somebody who lives in the US permanently. So if they leave for more than 6 months out of a year or for many years, they're not really living in the US. And so the green card can be taken away. Asylees and refugees are also basically a permanent status, but again, can be lost if certain crimes happen, certain types of travel. So these are great statuses to have. But we always encourage people with these statuses to try to naturalize and become US citizens, because again, that's the most secure type of status. So hay muchos tipos de estatus migratorio que alguien puede tener en los Estados Unidos. Este slide tiene todos los diferentes tipos de estatus. La parte superior es el estatus más permanente, ciudadano estadounidenses. La siguiente sección incluye residentes permanentes legales y asilados y refugiados. Esto también son estatus que nunca expiran, pero una persona puede perder este estatus si comete ciertos malos actos o ciertos tipos de viaje. Okay, so then the section in yellow, these are people here on visas. So some of these visas allow for the person to adjust status and become a lawful permanent resident, get their green card. So those could be things like K-1 visas, like fiance visas, or some types of family reunification visas, some types of work visas. But there's other types of visas that are designed for temporary stays, like tourist visas or student visas. So, you know, those visas, you can stay here as long as you're in the status that you were admitted in. But as soon as you change statuses or do something out of that status, you can become undocumented. So you need to kind of leave or find another status. And then in green, we have 2 other types of temporary statuses that expire. One is called DACA. I think most people have heard of it, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which basically means you don't have documentation, but we're not going to deport you as long as you don't commit certain crimes and that sort of thing. And then the other is called temporary protected status. This has been in the news a lot, but this is temporary status that's given to people that while they're here on another status, something really bad happens in their home country and it's not safe for them to go back. And so they're allowed to stay here until it's safe to go back. And then the last status that we have at the bottom are people without documentation, or those that are undocumented. So, en español, las secciones en amarillo representan a las personas aquí con visas. Algunas de esas visas permiten que las personas ajusten su estatus y se convierta en un residente permanente legal, pero otros tipos de visas están diseñadas para estancias temporales. Los dos elementos en verde son estados temporales que también pueden, que uno se llama DACA, para los niños, de los Dreamers, y el otro es estatus de protección temporal. Y el último estatus no es un estatus, es aquellos que no tienen un estatus legal aquí y no tienen documentación. So at KIND, we work with unaccompanied children. And this is the official definition of what constitutes an unaccompanied child, according to the law. That the child must be without a status or without documentation, must be under 18, and cannot have a parent here to take care of the child. So this is a little misleading because there are a lot of unaccompanied children who end up coming into the country and then coming to, say, New Jersey to live with a parent. And so you would say, well, they're not really unaccompanied according to this law because there was a parent here to take care of them. But this determination is actually made at the time the child enters or is discovered. So even if there is a parent already here in the US waiting to receive them, as long as they cross the border without a parent or guardian, they're considered unaccompanied. And those are the types of children that we work with. So en KIND trabajamos con niños no acompañados. Aquí está la definición oficial de lo que constituye un niño no acompañado. El niño debe estar sin un estatus o sin documentación, menor de 18 años y no tener ningún padre aquí para cuidar al niño. Tengo en cuenta que esta determinación se realiza en el momento en que el niño ingresa a los Estados Unidos, por lo tanto, puede haber un padre ya aquí con el que el niño va a venir, pero se cruzan la frontera sin el padre. Okay. All right. So this is the process by which an unaccompanied child comes into the US and what happens to them when they arrive here. And again, there's so much about this in the news, and there's a lot of confusion about what happens when a child just arrives at the border alone. So this kind of gives you the process. So este es el proceso que enfrenta el niño no acompañado cuando ingresa a los Estados Unidos. So first, they're apprehended at the border or sometimes inside the country, but it's usually at the border. And kids know this, so they often just turn themselves in as soon as they cross the border, and they're put into the custody of the Department of Homeland Security. And that is when the unaccompanied child designation is made. So primero son detenidos en la frontera dentro del país y puestos bajo custodia del DHS, de Departamento de Homeland Security, de Seguridad de Homeland. Entonces cuando se hace la designación de niño no acompañado. Okay, so after that, they're transferred to the custody of the Office of Refugee Resettlement. And this is actually under the Department of Health and Human Services. It is not under DHS. And at that point, they're put into a shelter. It's just a shelter with other unaccompanied children, and they go to school and they eat and they play and they just kind of wait there until a custodian is found for them in the US or a sponsor, and then they're released to that person. So, luego de estar con DHS, son transferidos a la custodia de la oficina de refugiados del Departamento de Salud y Servicios Humanos y puestos en el refugio or albergue. Okay, so two things could happen. Either they stay in the custody of the shelter until they turn 18 and then they're just released, whether they have anywhere to go or not. Or they're released to a sponsor who then enrolls them in school and takes care of them. So luego permanecen bajo esa custodia de ORR hasta que cumplen 18 años o son entregados a un patrocinador que luego les inscriben en la escuela y los cuidan. Okay, so at the same time that this is happening, ICE files something that's called a notice to appear. This document tells the person when and where they must go for their immigration court hearing. But recently, and by recently, I mean the last couple of years, there have been so many cases coming in, and the immigration court is so behind that most of these documents actually list nothing. They just say to be determined, like no date, no time. And that can make somebody think like, oh, I don't have court. But it's very important that any immigrant, whether it's a child or adult that has an A number and is waiting for it, and the A number is the number that you get when you enter the US and are detected, that it is really important to check with the immigration court every week to make sure that you haven't been assigned a hearing. You have to go to the hearing, or else you could be ordered deported. And so once ICE gives you that notice to appear, eventually you may, it's possible, you may go to immigration court. Immigration court is called EOIR. And there are 3 types of things that the judge may do at that hearing once the final hearing happens. One, the judge may decide, okay, I'm going to terminate this proceedings. It's over, we're canceling it, and you're done with the proceedings. The second is they might give you relief, like asylum or whatever it is you're applying for. Or the third thing is they may order you to deported, and that's usually either because you went to the hearing or because you missed the hearing. If you miss the hearing, you could also be ordered deported. So, al mismo tiempo que esto sucede con albergue y todo eso, ICE presenta algo llamado aviso de comparecencia. Este documento le dice a la persona cuándo y dónde puede tener que ir a la Corte de Inmigración. Recientemente han estado tan atrasados con las audiencias de la Corte de Inmigración que la mayoría de estos documentos no enumeran una fecha ni hora para la audiencia. Sin embargo, es muy importante que cualquier persona que tiene un número de A que está en proceso verifique con la Corte de Inmigración cada semana para asegurarse de que no se les haya asignado una audiencia. Si se celebra tener una audiencia, el juez puede hacer una de 3 cosas: de estimar el procedimiento, dar alivio u ordenar la deportación. Okay, so at the same time this is happening, an unaccompanied child often may be applying for different types of relief with USCIS. And the different types of relief they may try are things like SIJ, Special Immigrant Juvenile Status, asylum, a U visa, or a T visa. And we're going to talk about those next. So, un niño no acompañado al mismo tiempo puede solicitar varios tipos de alivio de USCIS, como estatus especial de inmigrante juvenil, asilo, una visa U, una visa T. Hablaremos de ellos a continuación. Okay, so here are the types of relief that we're going to talk about. The first is asylum. So asylum is something a lot of people have heard of, and a lot of adults also pursue asylum. But asylum has certain key elements that have to be met in order to be successful with your asylum request. Okay, so one of those is you have to prove that you have a well-founded fear of future persecution, so that you fear if you went back to your country, you would definitely be persecuted, or maybe, or probably persecuted. It depends on where you are in the country and what type of law you're under to determine what percentage you have to prove that you are likely to be persecuted if you return. And that has to be on account of either the fact that you used to be persecuted in that country, or for some reason, even though you were never persecuted before, you will most likely be persecuted if you return. But the other thing is, it's not just persecution in general. It has to be on account of one of 5 categories. So you had to have been persecuted because of your race, because of your religion, because of your nationality, because of your political opinion, or because you're a member of something called a particular social group. That one's a little bit more difficult to understand. The others are a little bit more straightforward, but basically that could be a group of people that share some characteristic that makes them susceptible to persecution. A very common example would be if you're a member of the LGBTQ community and that's persecuted in your country, for instance. Sometimes, depending again on the law, which changes all the time, it could be certain forms of domestic violence against women in a certain country or against girls. What's interesting is it's always a challenge around things like crimes or gangs. People want to think, well, there's gangs and they're trying to recruit me. And it depends on the details of the case. But sometimes those can be a cause for asylum, but a lot of times they're not, just depends. At the last piece of this is you also have to prove that either the government is the one persecuting you or the private actors who are persecuting you are not being controlled, like willfully, the government is not controlling them. So there's basically like no way to complain or get help with that. With children, they can apply for asylum at any time after they enter. They can either apply because they're in proceedings, or they could affirmatively apply for asylum. And if they apply for asylum, they go to the asylum office for an interview. And if they don't get asylum there, then they can go to court and ask again for asylum. So you're usually doing this at the same time as everything else is happening. For adults who who come in and want to claim asylum, if they have a court hearing going on, they can apply for asylum, but they need to apply for asylum within a year of entering the US. So there is a difference there. I also have links on here of little videos in English and Spanish that explain asylum a bit more. So esto es asilo, es un tipo de alivio muy común para adultos y niños. Hay diferentes cosas que están muy importantes de asilo. Todo de esas partes en esta caja, una persona necesita probar al corte o a oficina de asilo. Y por lo general, los niños están tratando de recibir asilo con al mismo tiempo de cada otra cosa que está pasando con la Corte de Inmigración, pero los niños pueden pedir asilo en cualquier tiempo. Adultos necesitan solicitar por asilo antes de un año de estar aquí en Estados Unidos. Y hay dos links aquí para videos sobre asilo. Okay, SIJ is another very common form of relief that we pursue with children, and this stands for Special Immigrant Juvenile Status. So this is a form of relief that's only for children who can demonstrate that they were the victim of abuse, neglect, or abandonment by one or both of their parents. This process has 3 steps in it, so it does take a little bit of time, but it results in the child getting a green card. So the process starts by going to family court. And so the first step is you go to family court in New Jersey or wherever, and you request that the custodian, whether that be one of the parents who's here or a sibling or whoever the child is living with, becomes the sole custodian. And in that process, you receive an order from the judge that basically says the other parent or both parents have abandoned, neglected, or abused this child, and therefore this other person should have full custody of the child. Once you receive that order, you then apply for the form I-360 with USCIS, which basically is the application for the SIJ status. And you have to wait about 8 or 9 months before that's adjudicated. But once it is, then if it is approved, then you go to the 3rd step, which is to apply for the green card. Now, it's important to note that this process takes a long time if the child is from Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and a little bit of time if they come from Mexico, because you have to wait for, they get, after step 2, they get placed on a waiting list. And the waiting list right now takes about 4 to 5 years until a visa is available. So they just have to wait. They just wait until their number is is available. And it just depends on how many kids are on the list. And that's because Congress set a limit every year of how many of these visas can be issued per country. And those particular countries just have a lot of kids waiting for them. So what I tell clients now is if we start now with family court now, it'll be a couple months until, we have the family court hearing, and then it's another 8 or 9 months before USCIS completes the I-360. And then we would probably have to wait another 4 years, 3 to 4 years before the visa may become available. So it is a long process, but it does result in a green card. And again, it's only available if you have a parent who abandoned you. So, no voy a decir mucho sobre eso porque todo está en este slide, pero SIDGE es otra forma de alivio muy común con los niños, pero los niños necesitan tener uno o dos o ambos padres que están abusando, abandonado, algo así. Hay 3 pasos para recibir SIDGE y es un proceso un poquito largo, es muchos años, especialmente si los niños están de los países El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras o México, porque hay una fila de espera un poquito larga para recibir una visa, pero eso es el proceso para recibir SIDGE. Okay, the U visa is less common, but we do see it. And this is a form of immigration relief. And this is, again, not just for children, adults are also eligible for this, that are victims of certain types of crimes. And to be eligible, the first thing that's important to know is the crime had to have happened here, basically. So this is not because you were a victim of crime in your home country, it's because you were here in the US and you got robbed or burglared or something happened to you, a victim of assault, something like that. So the crime had to have happened here and been against US law. It has to be a crime that's on a list, and I'll show you a list of examples in a minute. You had to have suffered some type of physical or mental abuse or damage as resulting from that victimization. And the last part is you have to have information that would be helpful to the police in investigating the crime. So either you are being very helpful with the police now, or you could be helpful in the future. But if the victim of the crime is under 16, there's some different rules for that because they don't want to have kids re-victimized through the process. There's only 10,000 of these per year, so there is a wait list for this as well. But it is a good option for people who have been victims of crime. And again, this is not just for children. So if a parent was a victim of crime, the child may also be able to be part of the visa. So un visa U es un alivio de inmigración para víctimas de actividades delictivas. Este crimen necesita ocurrido aquí en Estados Unidos y contra las leyes de Estados Unidos. So no es para un crimen de otro país, es solamente aquí. Necesita sufrió abuso físico o mental como resultado de la victimización y necesitas tener información sobre el delito que podrían ser útiles para la aplicación de la ley en la investigación. Pero si la víctima está tener menos de 16 años, hay diferentes normas porque ellos no quieren que los niños, hablar más y más sobre este delito. Hay solamente 10,000 de esas visas por año, entonces hay una lista de espera. Here are different types of crimes. And again, I'll send this presentation in English so you'll understand what all these are, but they are the types of crimes you might imagine. So there are things from sexual violence, trafficking, it could be some form of slavery or indentured servitude, kidnapping. One that we actually do see is female genital mutilation. And in that case, it is about the crime may not have happened here, it may have happened in a host country, but against the crimes of the US. So there are some exceptions to the having happened in the US, but for the most part, they have to have happened here. And then there's just many other types, obstruction of justice, all sorts of things. So this is just some ideas, murder, obviously. So esos son algunos de los delitos calificados para solicitar por una visa U. Okay, the T visa, also not as common, but this is a visa for people who were victims of trafficking. But it's not just they're a victim of trafficking here, it's the fact that the trafficking is the reason why they're here. So they were a victim of a form of trafficking. They're physically here in the US because the trafficking happened to them. So they were essentially trafficked here. And again, they have to say that they basically would provide assistance to the police in trying to persecute or investigate the trafficking. If they're 18 or older. If they're under the 18, there's different rules because they don't want to re-victimize. And you have to show that you're suffering like extreme like damages or that there has been some sort of extreme victimization of you. And especially would be extreme difficulty or hardship if you were removed from the US at this point. Again, there's only 10,000 of these as well, so there is a waiting list for this. So esto es la visa U, es alivio de inmigración para víctimas de trata de personas. Pero esta persona necesita estar aquí físicamente en Estados Unidos a causa de esta trata. Y hay otros requisitos aquí y también solo 10,000 por año. So hay una lista de espera. And this is also for adults too. Here are some examples of what trafficking looks like. So it could be labor trafficking. So a person is forced to do something that they don't want to do in order to pay money or to pay back a debt. We see this when people, were forced to pay for their travel here, and then they arrive here and the person who they owe like takes their passport and basically says, you're going to work for me until you work off the debt. Those are some examples of like work and trafficking that could lead to this type of visa. Also sexual trafficking, so forcing somebody to have sexual relations for money or food. Again, it has to be related to them coming to the US. So we would see this where people maybe sell somebody into prostitution across borders. We actually have had a client who was sold by their parents to a sexual trafficker and brought to the US that way. So those are examples of people that may be eligible for the T visa. So estos son diferentes tipos de trata que estas personas pueden recibir una visa T, pero es importante, recuerda que ellos necesitan estar aquí físicamente en Estados Unidos a causa de estas formas de trata. The last thing I'm just going to mention on types of relief is something that's not really relief as much as this is another way to come to the US. So what'll happen is sometimes kids will get here to the US and they will forget that, oh my God, my stepfather is a US citizen, or my brother is a US citizen, or, there's other family members who maybe have status here and can apply for them to get a visa and to adjust status. So these are the types of relationships that are required for an I-130 family petition. So it could be a spouse, you could be a spouse or a child. And by child, they mean you have to be single and under the age of 21 of an American citizen. You could have your children who are single and older than that of US citizens can receive a different form of visa. Spouses, children that are single of lawful permanent residents can receive these visas. Married children can also receive, of US citizens can receive them, and brothers and sisters of US citizens. So the only reason why these are listed out like they are is because there's different levels of these visas, and depending on where you fall in this list depends on how long you wait. So for instance, brothers, sisters of US citizens, I think you might wait 13 to 25 years, depending on what country you're coming from. It's a long game. Whereas spouses or children of US citizens, only wait like right now it's a little bit longer because of COVID backlog, but like 1 or 2 years. So estas son las diferentes relaciones que pueden recibir una petición, una visa familiar de alguien en su familia que está un ciudadano estadounidense o un residente permanente legal. And then here's just a note about DACA, because I do a lot of presentations with schools, and they ask me, well, why can't I just tell all my students to apply for DACA? And the issue is that DACA is really not an option right now for children who are at school age. And that's because it's kind of like a bubble. You can imagine as a bubble. One of the requirements of DACA is that you have to have been here in the US since 2007. And most kids that are in school right now were not alive in 2007, let alone in the US. So these are the requirements for DACA. And again, you'll get this presentation in English and you'll be able to see what all these say. But basically, you have to have been in the US since before you were 16, and you have to have been in the US since June 15th, 2007. And so a lot of kids today do not apply for this. Now, having said that, there are probably still quite a few people out there, young adults, people in their 20s or 30s who never applied for DACA who would be eligible. But again, that's not the clientele we work with. And there's a lot happening in the law right now with applications to DACA. So it is always something that someone should talk to a lawyer before if they haven't applied and wanted to. So eso es una nota sobre DACA. Ahora, DACA no es una posibilidad para los niños que están en escuela ahora porque necesita estar aquí desde el 15 de junio de 2007. La mayoría de los niños que están en la escuela ahora, ellos no estaban aquí en 2007. Entonces, no es una posibilidad para la mayoría de los niños escolares. Okay, so the next thing I want to say is, like I've said a bunch of times, like you should talk to a lawyer. But then the question comes, how do I find a lawyer? And so there's a couple things we want to just talk about to warn you about scams or other types of dangers with finding like a lawyer. So vamos a hablar un poquito sobre pasos para encontrar representación legal de calidad. Okay, so the first thing is to know is there's only two types of people that can represent somebody in immigration proceedings. Only two types of people, a lawyer or an accredited representative. So a lawyer has to be somebody who has a Juris Doctor. They have to be barred. They have to be accepted into the bar of a particular state. So New Jersey, like me, or whatever state. They have to, if you're going to get a lawyer in New Jersey and they say that they're barred in New Jersey, you should look them up on the New Jersey court's attorney search so that you can see and make sure that they actually are a lawyer and that they're in good standing. We also recommend, or it's a best practice to look up the lawyer, if you're looking for an immigration attorney, to look up the lawyer in the American Immigration Lawyers Association. This is like our group, our association of immigration attorneys. And so you can have any attorney represent you, but if you want somebody who really understands immigration law, you might want to pick somebody who's a member of AILA, because that means that they really understand immigration law. This is what they do. The other thing important to know is that foreign attorneys, so attorneys who are legal attorneys in other countries, they cannot practice in the United States unless they have a US license. So even though this is immigration, you can't use that attorney from back home unless they have a US license as well. So accredited representatives are a special classification of individuals who have been registered through a program that's administered by the immigration courts. And these are representatives who work for nonprofit organizations, legal organizations, and those organizations are on a list of registered organizations under the court. And these individuals have to be renewed with their status every 3 years. So to see that list, you can go to this link and you can search for the individual and the organizations. But they cannot go to family court. They can't help you with criminal matters. Lawyers can help you with anything. So it just really depends on what kind of need you have. So si necesitas un abogado o alguien para representarle a inmigración, hay dos tipos de personas que pueden ayudarle o representarle. Uno es un abogado. Es importante que este abogado tiene una licencia ahora en Estados Unidos, en algunos de los estados, o cualquier estado. Y es una recomendación de nosotros que encuentre un abogado que sea miembro de American Immigration Lawyers Association, porque esos los abogados que hacen solamente casos de inmigración. Y es importante saber que los abogados extranjeros no pueden elegir de estar abogado aquí en Estados Unidos sin una licencia de Estados Unidos. También tenemos representantes acreditados. Ellos están acreditados por la Corte de Inmigración. Hay una lista de estas personas aquí en este enlace. Okay, so it's important to know what your representative should do. Your representative should explain the law. They should tell you what the risks are. They should tell you what the benefits are before they apply for anything or tell you to do anything. And this is important because sometimes lawyers will just say, oh, you should just do this. And they don't really explain why or why that would be important or what the risks are. So make sure that your legal representative is discussing all of that with you. They should keep you informed about the case at all times. They should return your phone calls and messages promptly. This is an issue for some attorneys. They should provide you a copy of your file if you request it, and they need to keep your information confidential. They should not be talking to anybody about it, especially unless they get your permission. So esas son las cosas que el representante legal debe hacer con su caso. Muy importante que ellos están mantener la confidencialidad y que ellos mantener informado al cliente sobre el caso. Y yo escucho cada día problemas con esto, con otros abogados. Entonces es importante saber sus derechos y hablar con un abogado si alguien de estos no está pasando. On that point, there are things that the representative should not do. They cannot make promises about results. You know, if you watch these commercials, these legal commercials, they're very careful. Like, we have gotten these types of results, but they can't make promises about what you'll get. They can't claim to have special connections to the government or to certain judges. They can't keep your documents as collateral. So they can't say like, well, I'm only going to help you. Like, I'm going to keep this birth certificate, this original birth certificate. I'm not giving it back to you unless you pay me this amount of money or, you know, retain me as a lawyer. They should not charge you for immigration forms. All of those forms are free online. They should not tell the client, don't tell anyone I'm representing you. Like that's a problem. If they're representing you, you should be able to tell people they're representing you. They should not threaten to tell people that you're undocumented. They should never submit forms with false or misleading information. We hear this all the time. They should not do that. And they should never ask you to sign a blank form or sign forms with untrue information. Okay, so esto es una lista de cosas que el representante legal no debe hacer. Muy importante todo esto, pero especialmente de saber que los formularios de inmigración están gratis. So, no necesitas pagar para recibir un formulario. Okay. Yo sé que, I know we don't have a lot of time left, so I'm just going to do a few more slides here. This is just some advice for families to protect yourselves. So the first thing I want to say, the box that's in orange, is that it's really important that the documents are in the language you understand, or that they're explained to you in the language that you understand. You should not be signing something in English if you don't speak English and it wasn't explained to you in the language that you understand. You should always ask for a copy of the retainer agreement or contract that you sign with the attorney. And there should be a retainer and contract. They should say, this is what I'm going to do with you. Like, this is what my representation will cover. And this is the limit of what I will cover. You need to have that in writing. Never leave your original documents with anyone. Just give copies. And you can bring original documents to meetings and allow the attorneys to take copies. And for some applications, they may need the original, but that would only be when it's being submitted. Do not sign any forms containing false or inaccurate information. Do not pay cash. So if you can, use a check or money order or credit card, and make sure you have a receipt for every payment that you made. Never sign a blank form, and carefully read everything that you sign, because whatever is submitted to the government, when you sign it, you're saying everything in here is true. And if there's something that's not true, you need to tell the lawyer. Like, don't be afraid to say that's not right. Fix it now, because it'll cause more problems if there's inconsistencies in the future. And then again, always check online to make sure that the attorney is licensed, in good standing, or is an accredited representative. Estos son consejos para las familias se protegen. Nosotros no tenemos mucho tiempo ahora, so no voy a hablar mucho sobre estos temas, pero estos son, consejos muy importantes, especialmente esto que dice que necesitan entender lo que está firmando. So, si está en inglés, si no habla inglés, alguien debe explicar en su propio idioma que está en este formulario. Okay, there are two things I just want to warn about. One is notario fraud. So this is a scam in which people advertise themselves as being qualified to offer legal immigration services or other legal matters, but they are not qualified to do that. So this is often directed at Spanish-speaking communities, but we see it in all forms of immigrant communities called different things. And the reason this happens is because in a lot of Spanish-speaking communities, notarios or notaries are basically lawyers. They can operate like a lawyer, but in the US, they're two very distinct things. A notario might be like a lawyer, could be a notario, but a notario is not necessarily a lawyer. So when you see these signs advertising immigration help, blah, 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 if they're not attorneys, and you, again, check online, make sure they're an attorney, they should not be practicing law. They might have good intentions, like, I know how to fill these forms out, I can help you. But if they are giving you immigration legal advice without proper qualifications, this can have severe consequences for the immigrant, and you could lose a lot of money and get nothing done. So make sure that you're very careful with this. Tenga mucho cuidado con el fraude notarial. En Estados Unidos, un notario no está lo mismo de un abogado. Esas son dos cosas separadas. So es importante, de nuevo, usar solamente abogados y representantes acreditados y no usen notarios. Okay, one other type of fraud that we see a lot is something called the 10-year law. Notarios and attorneys sometimes commonly abuse this law. It's not really a law, but they call it a law to try to cheat clients out of money. There is no law that provides permanent residency just because you've lived in the US for 10 years, you have US citizen children, you have good moral conduct. There is no law that allows that. There are some forms of relief, one form of relief in particular that may assist you if you've lived in the US for 10 years, but it is not an automatic thing. And so there are a lot of people that will say to you, oh yeah, let's just apply for the 10-year law. They'll charge you a lot of money. You won't get relief, and then you'll get deported after it all. So do not fall for this. This is really important. So, cuidado con la ley de 10 años. No hay una ley de 10 años. Es algo que está usando por notarios y abogados. Y ellos abusan de esta mal llamada ley. Para engañar a los clientes sin dinero. So, es importante de no usen esta ley porque pueden, los resultados posibles están deportación. So, por favor, tengan cuidado con esto. Okay. The rest of the presentation you're going to receive by email or however it's going to be sent to you. I just want to note a few things that the next section really talks about how to prepare your family. And this is especially if you have a situation where you may get deported and you have children and you want to make sure they're taken care of if you leave. You'll be able to go through that section. One thing I do want to just note, this kind of doesn't fit under here, but I needed to find a place to put it, is that as of January 1st of this year, every child in the United States under the age of 19 can receive NJ family care, which is health insurance, without status. So before you had to have a social security number, now you don't need one. So this is really important if your children do not have health insurance, that you can now apply online for that. The rest of the presentation that you'll get, you can go through family preparedness, and then you can also go through know your rights when approached by ICE or police, what to do if ICE shows up at your house, at your place of work, anything like that. Okay, so la resta de presentación ustedes van a recibir por email. Hay una sección sobre cómo pueden preparar su familia por emergencia si uno de ustedes van a ser deportado y los niños van a estar solas aquí en Estados Unidos. Pero quiero decir que ahora, hasta 1 de enero de este año, todos los niños en New Jersey pueden tener New Jersey Family Care, que es seguro médico. So, por favor, usen este enlace para solicitar por esto. Okay, and I think I'll stop there. Kathy, I'll turn to you.
Well, thank you so much, Erin. That was an amazing amount of information, and I'm sure people will find it very helpful. People who are attending will be getting the resource list sometime this week after I compile it. But also it will be available from now, by the time I finish it, on our website. So you can refer anyone to our parent resource page on the New Jersey TESOL, New Jersey BE website, and the information and your PowerPoint and this video will be there. So thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions they want to drop in the chat just briefly? We've got just like 5 minutes before the next presentation. If not, thank you so much, Erin. It was really wonderful. Really appreciate you coming and spending your time with us today. There are 2 more presentations. If you refer to your document, you will see the links. Let me just check that myself. So the 2 remaining will be on the Supera Spanish speaking program at Kane University and helping parents of ELs to learn how to speak English. And then also that's in Zoom room 1. And then in the second Zoom room, we have helping EL students find their way mental health services in New Jersey, what parents need to know. So we appreciate Erin being here today. We thank all the parents who are here. I thank my co-ESL or NJTESOL-NJBE staff who are here. And thanks for attending. Take care, everyone.
All right, thank you.